Today when I was planning this video, I came across quite a few different interesting stories regarding the housing market, ranging from housing market predictions, ranging from how affordable is housing today compared to the 1980s. So I want to dive into a few of these things because it brings up some very interesting points with real estate. Now, one thing that we know for a fact right now is that real estate has not been this unaffordable in like 40 years. So the last time people were really struggling to buy houses was quite a long time ago. Now, what they say in this story is that if you were to buy a house in California back in the 1980s, you would probably pay about $127,000 for that house. And today, that house would be worth roughly $1 million. Well, obviously that's like a cheap area of California, because to get a $1 million house in California is like basically living in the ghetto over there for the most part. And so they arrived at this $1 million price point for the house that used to be worth $127,000 by using how much the home prices have appreciated in California over the past 40 years. And according to the St. Louis Fed, it was about 5.3% per year when averaged out. So somebody who could buy a $127,000 home in California in 1984 that is now worth $1 million, that's for that same house. In reality, that person can actually only afford a house worth $610,000. So right away, they say, well, prices would have to come down 40% in California to meet what people can actually afford, which I think is actually true. But they come up with a little sneaky point in here and they say, well, if you actually take interest rates into consideration, then that changes the picture. The $1 million house today at a 6.6% interest rate would cost you about $6,000 per month with property taxes and insurance. If the house was $610,000 but with the interest rates of 1984, then that would be a 13.3% interest rate, and they're saying that would make your monthly payment about $6,150 per month. So it would actually be more expensive if you were to use the interest rates from the 1980s and what the house should cost. So then this brings up an interesting question of if home prices today, when you adjust for inflation and interest rates, are technically more affordable than they were in 1984, then why are so many people struggling to afford them? Well, they say it largely is because of three different things, which I actually agree with all of this. And the first one is the down payment, guys, because they're taking into consideration you're putting 20% down to buy a house, okay? And 20% of $1 million is 200 grand versus 20% of 127K back in the day was much easier to save. It's more attainable. It's an easier number to accumulate for that down payment. And let's be realistic, people have not always put down 20% for houses. Most people put down less. But they say the other main problems are you've seen a massive increase in HOA dues across the country, and of course in California too. In the 1980s, the HOA fees for any given development were practically nothing. And that's because everything was so much cheaper to build and maintain back in the 1980s compared to today. Like, you could find a bare bones townhouse community or condo community, even a house community, where there's just maybe a community pool and that's it. And you could have a maintenance fee of a couple $100s a month, guys. Like, you're literally getting nothing besides the community pool and maybe a gate around your property. And maybe they do some of the lawn work and you're looking at least a few $100s a month for that. So it can really add up for these HOA dues versus back in the 1980s, it was peanuts. That's a brand new development. Literally last time I walked here, this building wasn't even standing here, guys. They're just still building places all over here in Miami, as if we don't already have enough people here. It's getting nutty. But besides the HOA dues, guess what else has gone up with real estate? Property taxes. That's another big one. That's another huge chunk of your monthly payment right now that people are not considering, guys. Like, literally, property taxes and insurance, depending on where you live now, can literally cost more than your mortgage payment. For me, when you add up my HOA dues and my property taxes and insurance, it's neck and neck. It's half of my monthly payment goes just towards the HOA, the property taxes, and insurance. That's how bad it's getting here. And I'm sure in other places, you actually pay more. If you live in a more affordable area where home prices are lower and you have a lower mortgage payment, there's a good probability that you're actually paying more for taxes and insurance than you actually are for your house. I mean, that's how crazy this is getting. And that's one thing that's crazy too about people always wanting their home values to go up, and everybody's celebrating the housing market continuing to rise and all of this. Like, how is that a good thing? Who does this really benefit? It only benefits existing homeowners from the perspective of when you want to cash in on that equity, you can grab that. But while you own the property, it's bleeding you dry, because your maintenance costs are higher than before, your property taxes are higher than before, your insurance cost is higher than before, everything is higher now. So yeah, you get to enjoy that higher value when it comes time to sell or pull some equity out of the property. But if you're not doing that, there's like no benefit to this whatsoever, guys. And I would even go as far to say that the only time having a good chunk of equity in your house actually matters is if you're gonna sell that house, cash out, and move to a more affordable and lower cost of living area. That's when it's really going to benefit you, because now you're taking that equity that you accumulated in a higher cost area and putting it into a cheaper area and making your life easier and more affordable. Now, Nick Shaw, he is a chief executive over at Home LLC, and apparently his home price prediction for 2023 was more accurate than anybody else's, because he estimated it would go up about 4.5%, and according to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, it went up 4.8% in 2023, as of the October numbers anyways. And so his newest prediction is that he thinks in 2024, home prices are gonna rise anywhere between 4 to 7% this year, guys. Like, I'm not gonna say that that's not possible, because I think now that we're living in an upside down world, that anything is possible. Things that didn't seem possible to me a year or two ago are now starting to seem possible, because nothing seems to actually make sense. Because what we see, what's happening in reality, is not really lining up with what should be happening based on current market conditions. So that's why I'm calling this upside down world, because none of this actually makes any sense. But according to his AI prediction models, home prices are going to go up anywhere between 4 to 7% this year. It's mainly going to be due to the fact that interest rates are projected to go down in 2024, although we have not seen a rate cut yet, and that is still yet to be seen, because that's largely based on rates going down, which there's no guarantee of that actually happening yet. But he says due to the fact that rates are supposed to come down this year, and that single-family home construction dropped 11% annually. Plus, he says that even if we see unemployment go up, that will not materially increase delinquencies, because the credit quality and home equity of most borrowers is pristine. Well, I don't really understand that part, because who cares how good your credit is and all of this? If you don't have a job, you can't pay your bills, guys, unless you're one of the smart ones that has the emergency fund and you can pay your bills for 6 months on end without getting another paycheck, which is not a position most people are in. Although he did say that even though he thinks that the housing market will rise in 2024, that he's still bearish on these three markets: Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho, and Denver, Colorado. He still thinks things are going to go down in these areas. And the other interesting part of his prediction is that even though he thinks the housing market's going to do well in 2024, he thinks in the long term, meaning within the next 10 to 15 years, the housing market's not going to be doing so great, largely due to declining birth rates and the affordability challenges of today's generation. And he's saying the same thing here that a lot of other people have been saying about this, which is that when the baby boomers start to die off, they're going to leave behind this massive supply of housing inventory for somebody to pick up, guys. And the next generation is not as big. So there's not as many people to absorb this, and they definitely don't have the money to pay today's prices. So it's almost a guarantee that in the future, we're going to see lower prices for homes than we see right now. But as we know from everything that's been happening in life, there are no guarantees. But honestly, I don't think interest rates are the end-all be-all with things, guys. Like, I talked about this the other day in one of my videos, and several of you wrote comments talking about how, you you sold your house even though you had a 2.8% mortgage rate or you had a 3% rate because something in your life was more important than that 3% mortgage rate. And I think that's the case for the vast majority of people out there. It's just that a lot of people hanging on to these rates are in a good position. They don't want to give it up unless something comes up where they feel like they need to give it up. Now, one company that's been hiding in the shadows for a while that we haven't talked about or heard from in a long time is Opendoor, the home flipping company. According to SFR Analytics, they looked at a bunch of Opendoor's acquisitions and how much money they lost and how they're turning things around. So check this out. The average home that Opendoor bought in June of 2022 incurred a loss of about $25,000 per property. That's a pretty substantial loss, right? However, the same study determined that homes that Opendoor acquired in February of 2023 experienced a gain of $49,000 on average. It looks like this is giving Opendoor some more encouragement to continue with their bad habits of trying to flip homes in a shaky housing market. You know, they get a little whiff of good luck and they think that they're going to be back on top of the mountain, guys. And I think they're going to be sorely disappointed. I could be wrong, but their track record's not so great. So when they asked Opendoor about this, here's what they said. The results demonstrate that our continued strong execution and market share gains in what remains an uncertain U.S. housing market. So basically they're saying, yeah, we're the greatest company on earth right now when it comes to home flipping, and we're able to turn a profit even when things are kind of shaky right now. But even the CEO of Opendoor admits that nobody knows where this housing market's going to go next, guys. And I think that's a pretty safe bet right now, that nobody really knows. And I think that's really the only guarantee about the housing market right now and our economy in general, is nobody really knows what's going to happen next. And you know, as a side point, it's not a huge surprise that housing's so unaffordable when you have all these games happening. You know, you have companies like Opendoor that the only reason for their existence is to buy the house from you at a cheaper price under market value and then turn around and sell it to the next guy for a profit after doing nothing to the house, just taking it off your hands fast because you want to get out of the house fast and you don't want to wait 10 or 15 more days to close in a normal manner. Like, because people want convenience, because people can't afford their bills, opportunities for companies like Opendoor exist. So that should also tell you something as well, guys. Like, if things were going so great in the economy, then a company like Opendoor really wouldn't have a leg to stand on, because everybody who owned a home would be fine waiting as long as it takes to sell their house for the price that they want, rather than turning to a company like Opendoor and selling it to them for under market value. Now, the last thing I saw that I thought was worth mentioning here, 4 reasons to avoid buying new construction despite the housing shortage. And some of it is kind of true, but some of it is like, yeah, I don't know, guys. Take a look at this. So the first reason they say you shouldn't buy new construction is because of all the delays. They say it's not unusual for buyers to lose their deposits on pre-construction homes due to the fact that things take longer than they thought and interest rates change, and sometimes the pricing of the homes change, and they put down a deposit, and then by the time the house is ready, they can't qualify for the loan and they lose that deposit. So yeah, that is a risk that you take for sure. But anybody who's going into buying a new construction home should be well aware that there are these risks present. That, you know, if you're buying a house that's just a plot of dirt right now, that there's going to be a timeline involved, and there's going to be market conditions that are going to change in the interim. They say on average it takes about 6 months to build a brand new house from scratch if there are no delays. But one way you can prevent this if you're buying a brand new house is there's plenty of neighborhoods out there where the houses are already built and they're just waiting to be sold. So you can easily avoid that problem by just buying in a new construction community where the house is already standing. Now, the next reason they say to avoid it is because of higher property taxes. When these communities are built from scratch, you know, they don't have any infrastructure like roads and water, plumbing, or anything like that. So all this stuff needs to be added, and therefore costs you more in property taxes. And also, let's face it, the higher cost of the home, the higher price you pay, the higher your property taxes are going to be as well. But one little sneaky thing here is it's not just property taxes either, guys. Like, a lot of these brand new construction communities, I think the number was close to 90% of all new construction communities being built today are HOA communities as well. So not only getting hit from the property tax side of things, but they're all forcing you to be in an HOA. And the thing is, a lot of people want to blame the builders on that, but actually it ends up being the local counties and the local governments that force these builders to turn it into an HOA community, because the local city doesn't want to spend their money on building the roads and the infrastructure. They want to charge the new residents this. This comes in the form of HOAs being created like no tomorrow across the country in a lot of these new developments. So on this point, they're actually right. You're gonna have higher fees when it comes to buying one of these new construction homes. And if you don't wanna live in an HOA, you might wanna avoid them altogether. Now the next thing that they say is you don't have as much flexibility to negotiate, which I would actually say is probably not true. Like, yeah, you can't really negotiate the actual contract itself. They kind of have their own set contract most of the time that you need to abide by, but people are negotiating interest rates, they're negotiating interest rate buy downs, they're negotiating free upgrades to the property, they're negotiating all kinds of stuff, which leads me to the very last reason that they say you shouldn't buy it, and that's because that brand new homes are more expensive. However, brand new home prices have literally been crashing over the past year and a half, and they're coming down almost to the point to meet existing home prices. Now, according to this data, which I'm not sure how accurate this is, it sounds like a larger gap than it is, but they say that as of November, the median sale price for a new construction home is $434,000 versus $387,000 for an existing home. So about a $50,000 difference in price tag. But when you factor in all these incentives that builders are giving, especially with the rate buy downs, guys, and in some cases these rate buy downs can be permanent, and you can get a 5% mortgage right now, or maybe even less in some cases, in a brand new community that you're never gonna get with an existing home. And even though the house is more expensive, it can actually bring your monthly payment down to a lower level than what you would pay for an existing home. So I'm not sitting here advocating that people should buy a brand new home. I'm also saying don't avoid it, don't knock it, like definitely look into it if you're somebody in the market, because you might be surprised how much you can actually save. Most buyers, they don't care about anything. They don't care about rates, they don't care about prices, they just care about the monthly payment, okay? And the monthly payment can actually end up being less on a new house versus an existing home. So I don't know, guys, I have no idea what's gonna happen in 2024 when it comes to this housing market. I feel like you could just roll the dice and see where anything falls right now, because that's how unpredictable it really is. So we'll see, but one thing that is for sure is I'll be here to report on it for you. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.